Hello, my name is Oluwatimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and I'm continuing with my discussion in honor of Black History Month. Today, I want to talk about the first African American practicing attorney in Kentucky, Alberta Odell Jones. She doesn't get enough. She doesn't get uh, notice. She's not as famous as activists who were killed prior to the 1964 Civil Rights Act and legislation, like, you know, Medgar Evers or Emmett Till, but Alberta Odell Jones as well. She was uh, she was murdered, and her murder remains unsolved to this day. She was murdered in August the 5, 1965. She was only 34 years old. She was born November 12, 1930. So today I want to talk a little bit about her. Of course, it's particularly um, concerning for me or significant for me because, of course, she was an attorney. And of course, I do have a law degree from George Washington University Law School. I've talked about this often enough. And I'm doing this in honor of Black History Month. Before I give my own take on her life and the civil rights, her civil rights activism and the significance of her becoming qualifying as an attorney, I'm going to just quickly give her bio and just get it out of the way. She's a big deal. She became the first city attorney of Jefferson City, right? And so Alberta Odell Jones. She was born in November 12, 1930, in Louisville, Kentucky. Like I said, um, she graduated high school and then uh, she went on to Louisville Municipal College and graduated fourth of a class. Louisville Municipal College was a historically black college, and it merged with University of Louisville after schools became desegregated following Brown v. Board of Education. She went to she had graduated. She majored in accounting, so which of course is important to me as well because I did major in accounting as well in Troy University. So she did major in accounting and graduated third in her class in undergrad. Then she graduated from Howard University School of Law, third in her class. So she passed the bar exam in 1959, and and the year she graduated from law school. Uh, Importantly, one of her first clients after she graduated in 1960 was Cassius Clay, famously known as Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, of course, was from Louisville, Kentucky, where Alberta Odell Jones was from. Alberta Odell Jones was very active, right, during the civil rights movement. She participated in civil rights protests uh, in Louisville, Kentucky, and she participated in the March on Washington in August 1963. She was active in the Louisville chapter of the Urban League, which is the Urban National Urban League is notable for its civil rights activism for racial equality and socioeconomic opportunities for Black people. Uh, she also was active in the NAACP. The NAACP's acronym, or the abbreviation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is the foremost civil rights organization in the United States. Of course, they were uh, crucial in the litigation for Brown versus Board of Education. Of course, Thurgood Marshall, who went on to become the first African American justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, was active in the NAACP, was an attorney for the NAACP. Now, Alberta Odell Jones also was very active in voter registration. Of course, this was prior to the passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 under President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration. She would rent, voting machines and personally teach African Americans how to vote at a time that the KKK and people in the South disenfranchised black people and intimidated them and tried to prevent them from voting. Now, I guess I wonder if her activism was responsible for her eventual murder on August 5, 1965. Till today, her murder remains unsolved. But Alberta Jones was was very significant in history, and I wish she were as popular as people like Rosa Parks because of the her significant accomplishments and her her activism, her success, as an attorney. She was only She died at the age of 34, right? She was murdered at the age of 34. She was murdered just about 6 months after she had been hired as a prosecutor in Louisville's uh, Domestic Relations Court, right? So it's very unfortunate, and again, it's unknown, what the motive was. Uh, Without a doubt, though, uh, it's not a stretch to conjecture to guess that it was a hate crime, right? It was a hate crime. And those of us who suffered from hate crimes, we know the elements, you could see the signs, especially considering the era, right? That was the civil rights era. I just mentioned more famous personalities that were killed during that time because of, white extremism, outrage and backlash. Excuse me, like Medgar Evers in Mississippi and Emmett Till in Mississippi as well. Kentucky, of course, was is part of the South as well, and there was a lot going on there. In any event, her body was pulled out of the Ohio River, and although there was an initial uh, wrong ruling that she had drowned, but upon further investigation and a subsequent autopsy, it was found that she had been bludgeoned, beaten with a brick. Her head had been smashed with a brick, and her car was found not far from a few blocks from a bridge, and they found that it was all bloodied up. There was blood all over her car, and later on, although um, there are witnesses who later testified that they found about three unidentified men tossing a body into the off the bridge. But till today, her murder remains unsolved, and so, which is a huge, it's a huge loss, and it's a pity. But her life was cut short, you know, at a very young age, and at her prime, in her prime, it's a testament to the grace, the resilience, the brilliance, the compassion of Black Americans in the struggle in this American experiment. And those were darker periods, right? Those were darker times in the Jim Crow era, right? She became, in order to understand what it meant for a Black woman, till today, Black women are, suffer the intersectionality of sexism and racism, right? That's for Black American women. She was an African American woman. That's Alberta Odell, O. Jones. So they suffer the intersectionality of racism and sexism, right? And imagine what it meant prior to the civil rights era. I was just watching a clip of A Few Good Men before I did this video. In fact, that was what particularly inspired me to just do this video right now. When Demi Moore, you should watch A Few Good Men. It's a great law. I think the best legal drama movie that I've seen. Um, when they went to meet Jack Nicholson's character, who was a colonel in Guantanamo Bay, and Demi Moore was an attorney investigating a death, and um, she was Tom Cruise's senior. They were both attorneys, but Tom Cruise was dominating the conversation, and Jack Nicholson, the colonel, was outrightly sexist, right? Just demeaning her, and even uh, Demi Moore's subordinate, Tom Cruise, was being rude and disrespectful, and trying to talk down on her, which of course prompted Jack Nicholson to be more overtly sexist towards her. So you can imagine what Alberta Jones must have experienced in the 1960s, 1950s when she was in law school, and 1960s when she qualified as an attorney, very competent. Again, she graduated third in her class, fourth in her class at Howard University School of Law. She must have been one of the few women, um, and she had been an accounting major. She had charted her way, and unfortunately, she was murdered. Uh, no doubt because of her activism, and it's a travesty that her death, her murder remains unsolved till today. And it's, of course, more particularly disrespectful and disheartening that she doesn't get, coverage or attention, or, like Medgar Evers does, or Emmett Till. Most of us don't hear about Alberta Jones. So that's the reason why I'm doing this. Now, she was till today, America is often dubbed, an aristocracy of lawyers, and for someone to be a descendant of slaves who attended Jim Crow schools, segregated schools, um, and then she should be able to, reach the pinnacle of the profession as a state prosecutor. She became a state prosecutor in Kentucky. She was licensed to practice, and she was cut. She was just killed, murdered. I want to give the backstory of how blacks are often precluded, forestalled, how they were forestalled during the Jim Crow era, prior to the Jim Crow era, from education. There were anti-literacy laws during the era of slavery, right? Um, Notably, there are those anti-literacy laws passed in South Carolina in around 1739, the 18th century. There's several all over the South, in Georgia, all over the slaveholding South. The idea was that if slaves were educated, they would, they would incite rebellion, and they would escape, right? So education for slaves was banned. It was actually a crime. If whites were caught educating slaves, teaching slaves how to read, then they were subject to $500 fines. This was during the era of slavery in the 19th, 18th, and 19th century. They're subject to $500 fines. That's a lot. That's a huge fine even till today. $500 fines and imprisonment, right? And or imprisonment. While for the slaves who were caught teaching other slaves, or blacks who were caught teaching slaves, um, could become, they could be maimed, right? They could get their toes, their fingers chopped off, and then they were subject to 39 lashes, right? Public whipping, 39 lashes, yeah, um, carried out by the justice himself, 39 lashes. So reading was strictly prohibited to to the slaves, to Black Americans during the era of slavery. It's interesting that we actually had a president. Well, I always remember that from law school. This was what my one of my professors told us in class, that Woodrow Wilson had actually advocated for that blacks should not be taught to read. I mean, Woodrow Wilson lived in the 20th century, was part of for part of the 19th as well. And it's interesting that he had been president of Princeton. He was a professor, but of course, Woodrow Wilson was a dyed-in-the-wool racist, right? He was our 20th president, but he was the first, the president to film, maybe the only president to film that racist movie, Birth of the Nation. By the way, Birth of the Nation, he didn't film. He screened it. He had it screened in the White House. Birth of the Nation, and it was apparently it was initially called The Klansman, right? And the movie was glorifying the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK. There's a report, 175-page report, of the KKK, that was written by a government body that I've started reading, and it's interesting how the KKK, its participants, its adherents, many of them were church members, right? They were people who were high up. Many were government officials. Some were judges, and politicians, and they were members of the KKK. Because the nation was invested, the South especially was invested in racism, and subjugation of black people and white supremacy. So um, so Alberta Jones' achievements, as an attorney, as a practicing attorney and prosecutor, was particularly very inspiring, considering all the hurdles, the obstacles, to the obstacles um, that undermined uh, black access to education, from not just the era of slavery, but also in the Jim Crow era. She lived in the Jim Crow era. The sort of education that was afforded to black people during the Jim Crow era was subpar. But she qualified and excelled, and she passed the bar, the Kentucky bar. They didn't have a black bar exam or a white bar exam. We still took the same bar exam, and this was a woman of great promise. And the world, um, the world, you know lost a gem in her murder, and hopefully it's a cold case. It's a 60-year cold case, over 60 years now, but I hope we will one day get closure and know exactly what happened, how she was murdered, and why. We know that she was bludgeoned, she was beaten in the head with a brick, as the subsequent investigations revealed, and she was thrown into uh, the Ohio River. And it's particularly concerning, especially in these times. We keep getting all these weird reports, these reports of blacks being found. Just a few days ago, there was a report last week of a young black college student who was found hanging on a tree in the park in Georgia. And there have been several reports like that, and his family, question, they claim there's foul play. The police reports claim that, well, it was a suicide, and the family disputes it. So several of these things have been going around. They're random. They appear random, but it's, again, I'm doing this in honor of Black History Month, and for new Americans, right, of African descent, to be aware of the history of racism, right, the strong, visceral history, violent history of racism in this country, and not to underestimate, undermine, or dismiss or disrespect the struggles of Black Americans. Especially, they've had brilliant people like Alberta Jones, who gave their all. They were more than capable to competent in confronting the vile, odious institution of racism in America. Unfortunately, it cost her her life, and it's the reason I'm doing these videos, to know that many people have died to be able to obtain this equality. There's this access. It's not yet equality, but it's a lot different from Black Americans were facing during the Jim Crow era. That people like me, I'm an American citizen now, and many other new Americans of African descent are experiencing, right? Many people, made sacrifices. And is that to say that, well, we should let, notorious Black Americans, any notorious Black American walk over them like a doormat? No, that's not what I'm saying. Even, the Black American community is not homogenous, right? It's not, they're people who allow themselves to be instruments of the KKK and white supremacists, right, all the time. And they're used to sabotage uh, Black people. We don't know who killed um, Alberta Jones. It could have been a Black person who was used, maybe Black people were used to kill her in monitoring her movements. We don't know what the motive was. Without a doubt, it was a hate crime. I'm going to stop this video here. And again, I think, I've said enough about, honoring the life and legacy of Kentucky's first practicing African-American female attorney, Alberta uh, Jones, who died at the age of 34 in August 5, 1965, by unidentified assailants. Thank you. I'll keep you posted.